merci à tout le monde. Merci.
Thanks everyone for being here. We're going to have a fairly interactive roundtable. In order to be interactive, if you want to ask a question, please get up and go to the microphone. But I would ask people first to introduce themselves here so that we know who we're talking to, what your name is, and what you do. Gregory Shechtman.
Retail properties.
Bonjour, mon nom est Sébastien.
Sébastien Corbeil. I work for the City of Montreal, and I'm responsible for all technological projects. Daniel Forgues, professor at ITF. I'm head of the Proulx chair. Alain, I'm project director for 2 new buildings at the University of Montreal. I work for EllisDon and coordinator Labbe. I'm BIM coordinator for Christian. Thank you, everyone. I think we have a good panel. So I'll start with something that's simple by asking everyone, but more to the job providers or work providers. What kind of work do you seek, and what can BIM do for you? Sébastien? We own real estate. We manage 1,700 buildings, 4,500 plots of land. So the challenge is to manage all of the information for all buildings at the same time. So the information has to be contextualized. There has to be audits, study the results of audits. So BIM for us is a new way of using information in such a way as to have a better performance and to be able to deal with an important problem in the maintenance of buildings in our company. I'm with the University of Montreal since June of 2014. The project that I lead has been operating for quite a few years. When I arrived, the team of professionals had already been selected. There's already an important, substantial real estate holdings. So there's a former site that used to belong to the Canadian Pacific, and I'm part of those people who really believe in the idea. I'm not really a software guy. What I'm really interested in is the information we can get and the benefits we can get from the information. And I like Dominique's image that the construction will take 3 years, but the building itself will live for 60, 70, 80 years. So we have to get everybody's cooperation and change the way we deal with one another, and to try to cooperate as much as possible. So there are property managers then. I'd like to hear the other panelists on other types of work that's given out. Daniel or Gregory might talk to us about other work providers, work givers. I was in Europe a few weeks ago. One of my major questions that BIM was presented as a solution for real estate management. The costs of interoperability were enormous, we were told. And as surprising as it may seem, it remains underdeveloped, the real estate management field. I'm looking today, from what I've heard, we here are doing fairly well, although in Europe what we see that there's a movement to standardize or normalize around EFC protocols. So we'll be stuck with protocols. There's been a lot of bad experiences in this field. So this is the movements that are going on in Europe. And there are some countries that have been more aggressive. In England, for instance, or Great Britain, people have to do data drops. So from design to execution, there has to be another challenge. Some of you may have solutions. If you can do subsequent interventions and the management of all of the mock-ups, you won't have 1,500 management facilities. You'll need more data. How do we manage this? Especially, we have two management systems that are parallel one to the other. I haven't seen a solution that's convincing so far. The integration with the facility management has not yet been completed. It still has to be refined. If we're talking about this today, although there are potential solutions, if we're talking about it, if it's not clear for us, it's not clear for many other persons. So we should leave more place for these solutions, and that these solutions be put forth as much as possible. Did you have something to say on this?
For about 8 months now. I'm in charge of industrial properties, therefore our applications are limited with BIM. However, we use it in a way to store all of our plans, all of our mechanical, structural, architectural plans online, easy access, and we give it to our contractors or to our tenants whenever they need it. So it's an efficient and easy way to access all of our plans. And it's been very helpful.
So it's more a collaboration tool. Right?
Exactly.
Daniel, tu parlais d'IFC, de standards non propriétaires.
Daniel, you talked about EFC and non-proprietary. Can we trust that the EFC will last over time? If we look what's happening in Europe, in Norway, for Smart Alliance, they're at the level of the economic union, what they're developing is going to become the norm. In my mind, EFC is here to stay. Dominique talked about it earlier. It's not as robust as we would want it to be, but with the commitment of the European Union, the effort will be put in, and the protocols are solid. Are Americans following? Building Smart is integrated. There are so many organizations in the United States that I get lost. So it's quite substantial. Smart Alliance. So the industry as a whole. So it's a movement that's quite widespread, and it's here to stay. So there's things in place that are solid, and they should be appropriated. And we will better understand these tools. One of the problems for smart Alien are nearly invisible in Quebec. We're going to try and change this situation. It's important in Canada that that we better understand what's being done by BIM. And question for everybody, as work providers or as professionals, do you think that your customers have a clear vision of what this is, where you're heading, and your objectives?
Well, I can speak on behalf of our organization at City of Montreal. We are in development. It seems like we're starting by the end, but we try to understand what we need, first of all, in order to be clear in how to approach projects. So I think that there are many people yet to convince, and the higher up we go up the organization, the less easy it is to explain. I mean, when you work with engineers and you're out in the field, it's easier to explain, to understand. But the higher up you go, you need figures. And to come in with figures, you need to have clear figures and a clear vision. So that's our process initially. Well, maybe to have figures, that's easy to say, but to have some concretely, where there's not much experience yet, there's not much data gathered, it's not easy to show. During our trip in Europe, and myself, we met people from Norway, and I told you, I'm not very tool-oriented, but I realized that, as Christian mentioned, that when it comes time to sell or suggest or speak of the idea, because in my whole previous life, I used to be at Dorval Airport, and you need to present projects, and we show that to management, and people don't understand. It's as though I was given a musical partition, and I can see notes, but it doesn't represent music to me that I can put together. So, I mean, we tell them, okay, university, we're going to put magnetic resonance here, and that's but they don't understand. I mean, it's not clear. It's a plan, but we need to educate, as a work provider, as people who are passionate about this. We need to educate our management, our bosses, to get them to understand the advantages of that. Now, how do we go about showing it to them in figures? Not so easy yet, but we'll get there. Ashley, Martin, do you have with your clients, do you realize the number of those, proportion of those who know where we're headed, who have a clear vision, or what's it like? Well, I think that's a big challenge, in fact. All the success stories we hear about in BIM, it starts with a well-educated client, but it's hard for clients to educate themselves, especially in Quebec, where BIM is starting to be implemented. Everybody does a bit of BIM here. Some do it in design, some in construction, some do it jointly, but everyone, I mean, the idea is to bring the different pieces of the puzzle together as professionals. We cannot establish the needs for a client. They're different from one client to the other. It depends on how they work, how they operate. So it's for the customer to regroup those people, their maintenance team, their operation teams, to determine their needs so that then we can provide the necessary data, because we know we've seen it in the presentations today. BIM models is full of data. As design team, I mean, we populate our model with design information. It's not necessarily useful for the client or the contractor. The contractor will populate his model with construction-related info, but with regards to the client at the end, it's hard to establish it as a professional. But in fact, for us as general contractors, What's important for us is to listen to the customer, to know what the needs are presently and in the future with regard to their project, depending also on magnitude of the project. And we try to find out what they need, and if we can, if we have the services for their needs. And then, well, that's it. So to listen to the client, find out what they need, and to offer our services and tell them what we are able to do for them. How BIM can help you long term. As I was saying, as general contractor, we have a lot of benefits working with BIM during construction. BIM is a very useful tool with regards to mechanical and electrical, and it generates a lot of time and money savings. But you also need to have a client who's aware of the development. And when we use BIM, to know if they would like to use it for something else, and if they do want to, how do we transition? Meaning, if we want to do it for construction, and later they would like to have that model for facility management, right? Then to do the proper transition too. So first, to listen to the needs of the client, offer our services if they want those services, and if they would like to invest and develop a budget for it, and then we offer the services. And it is with what we are able to report, meaning to save time and costs and money. That is how we can satisfy the client. But as an organization, you offer services to the client. Do you wait for the client to ask you before launching into changes in your business processes, or do you always keep it? Well, I do it exceptionally when the client asks for it. Well, it depends. It depends what you're talking about. If you're talking for coordination for construction, everyone's a winner in there. The client, the general contractor, the engineers, the architects, everyone's a winner. If we speak of business operations, well, it's a person who will then end up, and who will operate it. But the idea is to bring everyone's objectives together. Everyone has different objectives, so we need to align to a common goal and work together towards it. Back to what I was saying earlier, I guess, we really need to change the way we do things to get everyone to understand that by working and by collaborating. When I started working, I don't know, 27 years ago, I used to work for Shell back then. So now we no longer work in isolation. 30 years later, it's still working in isolation. So, construction operations are all different. It's not like, for example, I met the Oslo airport expansion while I was traveling. And he said he had to speak to lawyers and to make sure that, he was going to modify contracts. And now in the Oslo Airport Code, they pay according to the rivet model, not according to the number of cubes of concrete delivered. And so, okay, today we went to such a level on the model represents 100 square meters, so they pay 100 square meters. So they need to think about things differently, and the effort needs to be there to modify the way, to change the way people think about things so that they can all understand that they will derive important benefits from it. You find it's evolved in Quebec over the last, 5 years, let's say. Because I remember, let's say in 2007, I was wondering why we didn't do projects in 3D. I was coming in from aeronautics, so aerospace, the aerospace industry. So, we heard of Revit back then and so on. But I'd like to know, were not the objectives to go more into 3D back then? Well, 5 years ago, you would not have any job providers either at the table, very few. Now, if we look, many countries have given themselves objectives for 2016, 2017 in Europe. The province of Alberta had an objective for 2012, but I think it was delayed. And I think the Canadian Armed Forces will impose BIM next year for all projects. So we can feel that it's moving here in Canada. Do you find that we have that our maturity has evolved, or that we're still at the beginning as a market in terms of finding expertise, people who can do it? Because as you said earlier, that the government of Alberta, as you said, when the person left, the file stagnated. Well, I would say that at present, it was said earlier, I think too, that it's been years since I speak of BIM in Quebec. And over the last 5 years, progress has been enormous. I mean, the big hospitals, for better or for worse, really have given electric shock here in Quebec to the whole design. We were lagging behind at a certain point, but I think that there's a fairly strong movement forward in Quebec and that we're headed in the right direction. We'll have to see in the spirit of austerity that we are now facing whether this will be slowed down at all. Well, maybe we could try to find together what the elements are that you have in BIM type projects that you've implemented. Those who have more experience in that. Elements that you've put in place to make sure that this implementation will be successful. Maybe the major points. I think people would appreciate that. Who wants to start? No one steps forward. Well, we're talking of BIM management plans, collaboration, I don't know, just ideas. Well, there's one thing that had struck me. The hospital authorities in Norway said that what was most important as a client was to develop a BIM strategy that was signed by high management, which was largely published throughout the industry, and giving a clear signal, this is where we want to go, that those are our objectives, established protocols, and so on. So it's a clear message to the entire industry. The movement had started, and there would be no changes with that. I think that's what we need here as well, with regards to the bigger job providers, public level. I mean, the national defense took a firm stand, a clear stand. But to reassure the industry that the big job providers want to come on board and they will support the industry. So as in my presentation, to communicate, have a strategic plan, to know where we're headed, I think that's the key for all who want to support the job providers. And I think that a job provider who does not know BIM can still know what objectives they want to reach in a project. But do you think that the industry can say, well, yes, to reach those objectives, we know how to do it, here are the tools we're going to use? Do we feel that today when we speak of it in the market, or do we still speak of BIM and say, well, we don't have concrete solutions? What's your feeling? I know that what I find it's not always easy to have concrete ways of reaching our objectives. You need to work on it as a job provider. But can the market support you a little more in that, in identifying, or do you need conferences such as today? For people to get involved a little more intensely. Before people of the market speak, Danielle mentioned it a few times already. I was impressed to see the kind of commitment of all the stakeholders. I mean, everything's not perfect. Norway is not the ultimate. There's still a lot of work to do even there. But what was really great was the kind of gentleman's agreement where the stakeholders sign right off the bat and say, we commit to do what is necessary for this. They sign at the bottom of the page. It's not to say, okay, we're around the table, I'll do this, I'll do that, and then each goes their own way, and half of them don't do anything. No, it's a commitment. It's not a formal contract in the sense signed by lawyers and all that. But still, there's a kind of involvement. It's okay, we're gonna do it. We're gonna put in the effort to get some common result and concrete result. That was good. And as a job provider, I mean, we have a project of hundreds of millions. The airport probably, you know. But there was a lot of expertise, a lot of experience, knowledge, empirical knowledge has been acquired elsewhere. Because some people started before we did. And we need to get inspired from that. I mean, I spoke of the Oslo airport. I stopped in London and spoke to people there who use it a lot. And the airport industry, I mean, we speak of it a lot. We had in Dorval Airport, we had Pomerleau and so on. I couldn't have gone as far as I wanted to here with the management, but I mean, I've lost contact. I've lost touch with them. I promised myself I'd go and say hello, but no, I mean, we need to make sure that everyone's involved, in particular the job providers.
Montreal right now. I think it's important to introduce them as well to the BIM. I've noticed there's some talk about it, but there's not as much as there could be. I've spoken to a few of my real estate friends about it, and none of them have really heard about it. So I've found myself explaining it to them. The more that people become aware of it, the more that we can grow it. So essentially, it's in its baby steps now, and we have to build it up and inform more people about it so that they know. So it's important, in my opinion, to really show the new generation that this exists and that, you know, it's a very helpful tool for us, especially in management.
Well, ça m'amène à un point.
That brings me to a point. BIM management, BIM processes. Is that something that is done by a team that feeds a project management team, or is it project management that integrate BIM processes? Are there two separate things where it would be advantageous to bring them together? Maybe a university or a CJEP to have classes in project management where we speak not of BMI, but of BIM management as well.
When I started, it was very important. So really, I was just shown it by my office, but that's not a bad idea. I mean, to educate people before they get into it on BIM, and so that they come in with a very good understanding wouldn't hurt at all, obviously, to grow something, again, that's still small compared to what it can be.
Well, I think that with regards to education, Jean-François was saying it's probably the weak link in Quebec. I mean, CJEPs are really the most active. Universities are still quite lagging in that area. We're trying, I know that at ETS, we have 2-3 courses that we're giving at the master's level, but you need much more than that. In real estate management, they offer some training in that field. It's still lagging very far behind in terms of education. So I don't have the solution. Well, people need to have the same vision of project management. For project management to integrate BIM, well, there's a problem at that level. Often a lack of understanding of the training and what is BIM, really, the role of BIM for integrators or project managers. Again, this step hasn't really been taken. I wanted to draw a parallel with CAD in the early 80s. I did mention it. We had some CAD integrators, and architect office were still using drawing pads, and the clients asked for AutoCAD or similar solutions. Now there are no longer any CAD integrators. I think we're going to experience pretty much the same thing with BIM. We've asked architects to let go of their drawing table. Now we're asking them to drop AutoCAD to work in collaboration. So the shock is just as hard for them as it was initially to drop the drawing pad to work on the same mock-up, let's say. But I think within 5-10 years, all that, the offices will be integrated, and professional companies will take up their role of coordinator. I would say that as a job provider, myself personally, and the university as a whole, I don't think we can impose and dictate exactly what we want. We're still too young for that. Now, do we want to be imposed solely what such or such a professional is used to doing, what he did for another customer? I'm not too sure either. We need to meet halfway somewhere. Everybody's got to take a step and let go of our old ideas and find a happy medium somewhere, something that'll satisfy everyone, where everyone will feel confident. Yes, Pierre Desjardins, terminal navigation. It's an interesting subject to find the alliance of project management with BIM. I think Mr. Pomerleau was talking about what is specific field, who's in charge of what specifically. What I've observed, and I mean, I live in Quebec, but I work mostly in China. What I've observed is that we take advanced 3D, 4D, 5D software. Depending on taking charge, how that develops with regards to the BIM element, that's what will influence the future. For example, the University of Toronto at the master's and PhD level, the 4, 5, 6 the levels of Eco Office are taught within construction engineering. At Chongqing, at the University of Chongqing in China, it's taught in the financial and legal sector because it's a management, not the BIM. So I think that we will need to come, I mean, it'll take off. What we've seen in the last presentation, that wave that we saw, it's coming. I'm a surveyor in Quebec, and I remember 30 years ago we were wondering, there were people who would say, we have a privileged hunt here, because, I mean, we need to put our stamp for this and for that. And geographers will not come and take our place. Now, GI came up, and who took advantage of it if not the surveyors? So with BIM, with regards not to, in terms of modeling, in terms of the information, the way that we create information, the precision of the information, the way we transfer from pre-design to facility management, that's where the engineer type of intervener, three-dimensional, I mean, it's really got to be three-dimensional between the ears, and that's where we might have a new type of professional. Thank you. Well, I think that right now the challenge is that, well, at present we cannot have a BIM project manager to have I'm all in the same position. I think that's why the execution is still difficult. I love the presentations as we have them today because it seems so easy. But when we've done it, we know these are very complex processes. And often people who have experience of design, senior designers or project leaders, they don't necessarily have experience in modeling or are not even comfortable with computer data. So you need a BIM manager to frame the whole process and make sure that the process unfolds adequately. And it requires a radical way of working, because that was one of the big mistakes that was done at the beginning of BIM implementation in Quebec. They saw people Revit as a replacement for AutoCAD. They didn't change the way they worked, and so it's 4 times longer to draw in Revit. So the idea is you have to understand the process and integrate it. And I think that over the coming years, the role of the BIM manager will be very important. I would like to add also that I agree entirely, but what's important is the fact that in the world of construction, we have different companies, the subcontractor, the general contractor, the consultants, professionals, the client, people from facility management. Everyone can use BIM to their own end, for their own profession. So what's important is to have someone who can follow from beginning to end for each part of it. And so we'll have subcontractors who will need BIM for prefab. Okay, so what's important for them when they do modeling of their system, what helps them a lot is precasting and after delivery on the site. And so BIM is useful for them in that context, for that case. general contractor to make everything easier and coordinate, manage, make sure that everything's fine on the site. And all of that is communication with subcontractors. Then you have the consultants who use BIM for modeling, for advancing the 3D model, and also adding details as per customer or client request to the model. And everything is interconnected and communicates. And what's important is to have someone who can follow from the beginning, listen to the client requests, make sure that modeling is done the right way, mechanical, electrical coordination, on-site, site logistics, so on, all the way down to subcontractor level, all because it comes into precasting and implementation. So it's important to have fluid transitions through the process, and a rapid one as well, and to the satisfaction of the client at the end of the day, and to connect all these different fields, from the consultant professionals, subcontractors, to understand how these things work, and to make sure to manage it all. Because it's still at an early stage of development. We'll make mistakes here and there, but that's part of the learning process. So to make sure that at the end of the day, the client, facility managers are satisfied, so that then they can continue to evolve. It's a question, in fact. The comment is hardly audible, and I think that the job providers need to lead this process. Because it's in their interest and in the interest of the entire industry. I mean, they're not going to invent rules and imply it's not going to happen that way. Earlier, you said that we're going to meet with professionals somewhere halfway, the consultants. That's partly true, but I think that you should be the leaders, you should be consulted, you should be in touch with all the builders, the professionals or consultants, and implement a management plan according to the requirements that will be imposed for everyone that participates in the project. And you need to be more bold to go forward. It's job providers such as you that will help things to move forward, like you, City of Quebec today, because when things started, they were not able to do it years ago, but today they can. So you need to collaborate with everyone that you're going to have around the project, potential participants, because you may not even know them yet, those who will be part of the project, but to have a document that will be then followed. All the universities, well, not all, but all the ones who have published BIM guides work that way. York University in Toronto is very motivated, very inspiring, a very strong driver for BIM in Ontario, for example. So I'll throw that as a challenge. Well, I think work providers, I mean, yes, with regards to the larger work providers, universities, hospitals, it might be a little easier to get details. But we need to begin by establishing priorities, what's important for us, and then asking people to use means to reach them, whether it be 3D modeling or other means. I think that we need to set the objectives, and very tight objectives, maybe too tight, because people always say never have enough time and never have enough money. I think the industry will have to adapt, and they'll have to use performing tools. They'll say, what's in it for me? Why should I change my methods? It's costing me money. Well, I understand that, but if we ask for the best to participate in the project, the best will get the best tools. And maybe that somewhere along the way, we'll succeed in getting documentation. I mean, a solid organization for small work providers to write a document that is, is developed as a university. That might be more difficult. But I think universities can help in that process. We had somebody on the microphone.
I have one observation as a tourist.
Une observation comme touriste.
Quebec as an area, in Montreal and in Quebec City and even Toronto where I was last week, you're no different and no worse and no further ahead and no further behind than anywhere else. So what we're seeing in Hong Kong is a true reflection of there are really good projects, there are some that have gone not so well, there are some that are total disasters. But the debate is still the same. It is the clients, as the previous speaker mentioned, is the clients who have to run this. My question to the panel, given that probably the most of the projects here are designed, then tendered at the lowest cost or competitive cost, and then built, and then handed over to the owner, is that model, that traditional construction procurement model, is that really the way to deliver value to the client? And is BIM actually a valuable proponent of that? Because unless we have collaborative 3P contracts, I don't think we're going to unlock the value, the true value of the data and the information in the models. So I'm wondering what the panel think about the difference between design, price, build versus collaborative contracts.
En fait, je crois que c'est sûr que tant qu'on n'aura pas de contrat collaboratif, on va...
As long as there's no cooperative contract, there'll be a problem. Everybody agrees that the legislation has to allow BIM projects to develop, because otherwise they'll always be blocked. It'll always go to the lowest tender. Any comments? In the public area, universities being a public, we all pay taxes. There are laws that regulate all of these issues that don't lend themselves to the development or to favor all of this. I'm an optimist by nature, but I think we have to work on having the advantages better understood. Even for construction, if we can diminish costs, whatever way, ultimately the needs are always there. There's always other projects that require resources. So if we can optimize costs and spend on what we can save on certain projects, we'll be able to develop other projects. There's always more projects than there is money available. So let's try and do our best for these projects that do exist. If we can demonstrate that we are reducing our costs, it'll be easier to have new laws. Currently, in the United States, the cooperative approach seems to be very popular these days. An investigation of 127 hospitals, there are only 2 that overran their costs. Plus de son, s'il vous plaît. Could I plus de son, s'il vous plaît. I'm going back a bit. I'll talk a bit more about education. 2 points. I like it when Danielle provides figures. We've been giving out figures for 10 years now to try and convince everybody. What I can tell you, this is the 3rd cohort that's starting with the program. The AGC provided training here. We gave work providers an important role. And when we succeed in sitting them down with professionals and entrepreneurs, what the program done is to mix them together. They all become convinced of the usefulness of the approach. The problem is to get them to sit down with us and to train them. But when we deal concretely and we have interaction with the professionals, that's the objective of the program, is to have these people work together. We don't want to sit. When we become involved in training, things are much more concrete and convincing. Everyone is focused on the mock-up. They're not. Everyone is focused on the same thing. That's my first point. The second point that I wanted to talk about, I remember having been here at the last CanBin event. I raised the question, if colleges and universities work on training programs for industry, is this something you're interested in? I don't know if Christian was there at the time. Everyone answered, yes, we're ready. So what I'm doing now is I'm calling upon all of you. There are programs that are being implemented. Please come and see us and push industry to become involved in these training programs. And we'll make sure that we all speak the same language and are on the same page. But we have to sit down and just talk to one another. So that's my call for education. I see it in two phases, modelization and management of buildings. Modelization, everyone knows the benefits. I even wonder why, if work providers don't request BIMs, it won't go forward. It won't go anywhere. I don't understand. Maybe it's my personal background. Work providers don't request this. I would not wait that I'm to be told what to do. I would like to be first out of the block. If we want a race, we have to have the best car. We won't wait for the spectators to provide cars to us. Félix Côté, architect, your comment. There are so many things that I could say, but I'll try and focus. Work providers have to be involved because some work providers still want AutoCAD. Some work with Rivet, some work with... It's hard to have teams that are operational and that function with all of the software. We've been training people since 2006. Some never worked on a Rivet project, so we have to send them back to school. At the same time, there are architects who come out of universities who've never heard about these programs. Will there be certain standards? If we just ask for AutoCAD, we don't manage processes. If people say we want AutoCAD projects, for certain aspects, there are new functionalities that appeared in 2010, 12, 15. So when we transfer to other formats, it doesn't work. Sometimes we have to resort to archaic technology. Sometimes we work with engineers. I'm an engineer who works for an architect firm, and some refuse to work with certain technologies. If I may, MEP, when they ask for a turnover package to a certain standard, it'll be impossible to do so without doing a work that's quite complicated and lengthy to produce WWG, but never will attain the level of quality of something that was produced through AutoCAD. The client has not really thought the situation through. He asked for a BIM project, and then we look. There's the manuals. The maintenance manuals become important also. I had a question about cooperation. We all understand that there are advantages to cooperating together, but the development effort, because when it's implemented within the industry, things go well, but the most sensitive period is their costs, development costs. So the work providers give work, and the engineering firms or architectural firms will assume these costs. I would like to know, from your point of view, your perception as work providers. Do you expect to have a model delivered or given at the end of the project? Because certain firms, certain clients, engineers or architects, this is subjective what I'm saying, but from their point of view, there's a cost for this mock-up, for this model. If we want to deliver it, there has to be a price associated to this. What do you think of this? Do you expect to have a model that's delivered to you free of charge, or how to proceed? If I may, I will talk about my former life when I worked for the airport. When I spoke with professionals, managers, I was told that it was more expensive, that there was a cost to work in 3D. But when I talk with the technician, he always says what he could do what he did in 4 days, he now can do in 1 day. Who's right? The technician, who does everything more quickly. His supervisor certainly has another vision. I wouldn't know what to respond to this. I hesitate to say yes, it costs more. Maybe there are things that I don't know. There are certainly productivity gains in various specialties in engineering and in architecture that led me to believe that there was no additional cost. At the end, we would discuss and resolve the problem, but it took a few meetings. It's the initial investment that the firms have to make to work in BIM. At the beginning, there's no content. We have Autodesk. We start at zero. It requires many hours of development. And with time, it becomes interesting. Professionals, some will want to transmit the invoice to their client. So we'll finish quickly with one last question, as time flies. I got up when you spoke, Claude Giguère from Paget Morel, consultant. The main problem that we've had are drawing standards. We have blocks that have to be that have to be delivered, and it's impossible to do a project on Rivet or other software with drawing standards that exist. For example, there was a client who we had projects for 3D modelization. AutoCAD was part of the issue, and it doesn't help us to reach maturity. This has been an interesting discussion. Time is flying. We should have more discussions such as this one. I will be involved in the committee of work providers, so if you're interested in being part of CAN-BIM and being involved in the discussion on work providers, I'd like to thank everyone for having been involved and to have participated in the panel. And we'll now move on for the last part of the day. We'll have closing remarks by Pietro before completing.